sisters, it is so good to be with you today. We have loved being part of this awesome opportunity. This is our 1 year anniversary for doing these Holiness to the Lord devotionals. It was 1 year ago this month that Brother and Sister Barraclough gave the very first talks in our devotional, and it's so good to have them back tonight. It's great. They look so comfortable right there in their right spot. It's good to have them. We appreciate our stake presidency's support for these devotionals, and we're grateful to have President Sister Perks and President and Sister Lurcher with us. We love it when their wives can sit by them. And President Perks will be presiding tonight. For an announcement, our next devotional will be July 26th, and the speakers, Jeff and I are going to speak. So maybe you don't want to come, I don't know. And Brother Thomas Stansfield will be speaking. He's the new recorder for the Smithfield Temple. And we're going to be speaking on how will you serve in the temple. So I think that it will be a little bit interesting to see all the things that he has to say and can share with us. Our opening song today will be Holy Places, number 1026. Our accompanist is Marilyn Christensen, and our chorister is Holly Downs. After that, the prayer will be given by John Hess.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful for this opportunity we have to meet together tonight, to be able to participate in this devotional where we learn about the Smithfield Temple and temple work in general. Father, we ask thee that thy Spirit will be here to guide and direct us, open our hearts in the ways that we can continue thy work in the temples of our Lord. And we ask thee for this in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Next, we'll have a musical number, a piano solo by Sheena Chipman, I'll Go Where You Want Me to Go. After that, Jeff will give our quote, and we actually decided to finally switch from President Nelson quotes to President Oak's quotes. I think maybe because we're hoping it's getting closer or something, I'm not sure. And then after that, our speakers will be Tyler and Melise Salisbury. Tyler is the facilities manager of the Smithfield Temple, and his wife, Melise, is actually still working for the construction company doing the final touches. I kind of felt a little bit guilty in asking them to take some time to plan this talk, but I'm so grateful as I have learned a little bit about their history and what has led them to this point in their lives to learn more about that. I think you all will enjoy it as well. After they are finished, our closing song will be Joyfully Bound, number 1052, and Caleb Cayley will give our closing prayer.
The Apostle Paul taught that the Lord's teachings and teachers were given that we may all attain the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. This process requires far more than acquiring knowledge. It is not even enough for us to be convinced of the gospel. We must act and think so that we are converted by it. In contrast to the institutions of the world, which teach us to know something, the gospel of Jesus Christ challenges us to become something. Elder Dallin H. Oaks, October 2000, General Conference.
They're leaving us, but that's okay. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, the music, for the spirit that's been here. I hope that what I say, I feel like we could just go home now and feel the spirit and we can go home. I hope that what we might say tonight doesn't distract from the spirit that we feel here right now. Told I need to keep my remarks brief, that I talk a lot, and that I only have 2 hours. Is that right? No, seriously. It's a privilege being here. I love working at the temple. I think it's the best job in the world, and when anybody asks me to talk about the temple, I could be here for days talking about the temple. It's one of my favorite things, and I love my job, and I love the opportunity I have to be in the temple. And I love that song, I'll Go Where You Want Me to Go. That kind of ties in perfectly with what we wanted to talk about tonight. And I've titled, as it showed on the flyer, I've titled my kind of remarks or my thoughts for tonight, or the theme, if you will, is my temple journey. And I'm going to apply that both to myself, and we'll talk a little bit about your personal temple journeys and what that means. If we do have the ability, let's turn some of these lights down so you can see the screen. I have to give credit, so Polly Christiansen, she's, I believe, in your stake. She's one of my employees, and she took this photo, and so she let me use that. I've got a couple of her photos throughout the slideshow, and one of my other employees, Jeremy Barnes, has taken a few of the photos, and so give credit to them, thank them for the talent they have and being willing to share it. So first off, a little bit more about myself. I'm going to switch the picture here. So I've got me and my wife. So we have the opportunity to work together in Smithfield Temple here. A lot of people ask, well, what do you do? What does a facility manager do? If you know any of the guys at Logan, they call them the temple engineers. I love the guys at Logan, but they haven't changed their terminology in forever. They haven't been temple engineers for at least 10 years now, and so they call us the temple facility managers and the temple facility assistants. During the construction, I also was tasked, so unbeknownst to me, they started hiring the temple facility manager at groundbreaking. They used to hire us about now, right before the open house, and it wasn't time enough to learn the temple and hire your staff and get it up and running. And so they I applied for the job as the temple facility manager, and got here just after groundbreaking. So that was back in 2022. So I've been here for the whole time. I've been with the Barrack Left. They beat me on site. They were here before. I watched the dedication from Uruguay, and I'll get into that in a little bit later. But during the construction, they also asked me to be the site project manager. So I kind of wear two hats right now. As a site project manager, I'm the eyes and ears for the project manager who has an office in the church office building down in Salt Lake. His name is Matt McKinney. And I attend all the meetings here at site, meet with the contractors, interior designers, the subcontractors, and represent the church on the site. For the first, 3.5 years, I was the only church employee on the site. And so it was fun when I was able to start hiring a few employees a while ago. Last fall, I hired my first employees. And a facility manager, once the temple is operational, I am the manager that takes care of the grounds, the custodial, the security, the maintenance, everything, all the physical aspects of the temple, so that the temple president and the recorder and all the temple workers can do the work of the Lord and do those ordinances. And so if you never see me again, that's the goal. We try to be invisible and just let the temple operate. A little bit about myself. So I grew up here in Cache Valley. I'm from Newton, Utah. I do say my T's occasionally. I did live overseas, and they told me I needed to improve my language, or my English skills. So occasionally I do say Newton. My parents, Floyd and Vita Salisbury, are sitting here on the front row, and I'm grateful for their support, all that they've taught me, and I think I inherited a lot of my love from the temple, for the temples from them, and so I appreciate them. Grew up in Newton, went to Skyview High School, graduated in 1998, so that will date me a little bit. So it's been a while. Now my kids go to Green Canyon. I'd like to point my kids out. I'll show a picture of them. They're over here. So they were forced to come tonight to hear their parents. I'm glad to see the other young man here, and I think there's one in the back. So thank you for being here. You will be blessed. Hopefully you'll get something out of this. But I show this picture. After I graduated from high school, I went to São Paulo, Brazil on my mission. I was able to attend the temple there quite a few times, actually. So I was in the São Paulo Interlagos temple. The temple was just outside of our mission boundaries, but we were close enough that on P days we got to go quite regularly back then. And so it was a fun experience. After I got home, I attended Utah State University. I got a degree in civil engineering and never got my professional engineering license, but I enjoyed everything I learned about engineering. And unbeknownst to me, the Lord was preparing me for future responsibilities. Didn't understand at the time, but I worked at the cabinet shop for quite a while after. I worked at a cabinet shop, Homestead Cabinet, during college and then after for quite a while before I got a job. And I got a job with the U.S. Department of State as a facility manager. And that's kind of what trained me to be a temple facility manager. In college, a few years after I got back from my mission, I met my wife. I look like a teenager, I think, in that picture, but I was 23, so, but I look young. I met my wife in Sunday school at our singles ward, and so I said that's the best thing that I've ever gotten out of Sunday school. And we'll talk a little bit more about us in here in a minute, but we have 3 kids. I think I can point them out. Laser pointer. So McKay's the one on my left. I don't know, where is that up there? Yeah, on the left side up there. He's my youngest. He's 16. He'll be a junior this year at Green Canyon. He likes to mountain bike with me. He's on the mountain bike team, and he runs track. And then my middle son is right here in the middle. He's over there on the side. He just graduated this spring, and he just received his mission call about a week ago. He's going to Liberia Monrovia West Mission. They're splitting the Liberia Monrovia mission in July, so next week. So he'll be helping to open up that new mission after they split that. And my oldest son, who's on the right, he's on his mission right now in Helsinki, Finland. So he's just north of Helsinki at the moment. And very, very grateful for my kids and for the choices they're making. And so I'm thankful, very proud dad, and grateful for them. Thank you for being here. Let's see, next picture. So I mentioned after I worked at the cabinet shop, it's a very long time tonight, but I was impressed one day to join the State Department, the U.S. Department of State. And when I told my wife, she just dropped her head and said, we have to live in the biggest cities of the world. We're from Cache Valley. We like small towns. Newton has like 1,000 people. That's perfect. But felt inspired and prompted to join the State Department. At the time, we didn't know why. We knew it was for me and for my kids and for some future responsibility. And at a young age, I believe, I don't know, when I was a deacon, when I prayed about the Book of Mormon to know if it was true, I read the whole Book of Mormon when I was a deacon and prayed about it and received a witness and a testimony that this is God's work. It is true. It's all true. And I've never doubted since. And I made a commitment to do whatever the Lord wanted me to do. And I'm not perfect, but I strive to do whatever I've been called to do. And we just knew that when I joined the State Department, for those that don't know, they're the ones that operate overseas for the most part. So they have consulates and embassies, and they have an embassy in almost every country in the world, and then they have consulates in the larger countries, and they're the ones that process visa applications, and they host all of the different government agencies around the world. And so they operate a very large portfolio of buildings to maintain. And so they have, I want to say, 250 facility managers throughout the world for the State Department. And I applied, and I got the job. We were prompted to do so. And First thing they did is they sent us to Washington, D.C. Again, I don't like big cities, but Washington, in my opinion, I don't want to offend anybody if you're from Washington, D.C., but I think they're the worst drivers in the world. Everybody complains about Utah drivers, but it was fun, and I say that because there's so many different cultures and people that come to D.C., and they all have different driving habits, and I learned that as we lived overseas. But while we were there, we were able to attend the Washington, D.C. Temple, and that was such a wonderful experience. We were there during the Easter, and they had an Easter program, and I loved the temples. My first assignment was Ashgabat, Turkmenistan, and I didn't know where that was. I had to look it up. It's right above Iran and Afghanistan. It's a former Soviet Union country. It's kind of interesting. In the State Department, it's almost like a mission call, but they herded us into a big auditorium. There was a couple hundred of us that were all getting our assignments, and they announce it in front of everybody at the auditorium. And so they'll call your name, and they'll say, they call it Flag Day, and they'll say, Tyler Salisbury, you've been asked to serve in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan, and they'll hold up a Turkmen flag, and then you come up and accept it and go sit down. And so it's really kind of a fun day. When we got to Turkmenistan, there was no church there. I reached out to the mission president that was, were they? I can't remember. They were in Bulgaria. It was the Bulgaria Sofia mission that was over Turkmenistan. And first week we were there at the embassy, I actually met another embassy employee, and he caught me in the hallway, and he said, "Are you a member of the church?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, well, we're inactive, but we were the last ones here. Here's a box of the branch stuff." And he dropped a box in my hands. And it was Russian hymnals and some old CDs from the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and a few things. And, you know, if you back up just a few years ago, so it was 10 years this year, in 2026, I was called to the bishopric out in Newton Second Ward. And I only was there for about a year, and then we took this assignment. And I struggled with that for a while. I'm like, well, I feel very prompted to get a new job, but I just got called to bishopric. Should I stay or should I go? And talked with the bishop at the time, and just felt like the Lord was preparing me for something. Well, first assignment, Turkmenistan, that guy dropped that box in my hand and said, "We're leaving tomorrow, see you later." And as far as I knew, I was the only priesthood holder in the whole country. And I felt that weight on my shoulders. I've been a high priest for about a year and didn't know really what to do. So I called the mission president. Sorry, did I be this emotional? It was an interesting time in our life, and we say now that after I called the mission president, he's like, "Well, we're not going to set you apart. They were going to fly me to to Azerbaijan. They were going to fly me to Baku so I could get set apart as a branch president." And they said, "No." We talked to people in Salt Lake, and they said, "No, we're not going to do that. Just you'll be kind of a group leader," is what they called me, "and just organize church and have church in your apartment." And so this was back in 2017, and come to find out, my wife says we held home church before it was the cool thing to do before COVID. And so, we started holding church in our little apartment building there. And we started praying for more members. We said, if I have to give a priesthood blessing to my kids, I'm the only one. I can do that, but I'd love to have somebody with me. And, my kids were first, third, and fifth grade at the time. And we prayed, and lo and behold, another family transferred into the embassy, and they were members of the church. And then we found out there was actually another family that was at the embassy that were inactive. And when they found out we were having church, they started coming to our ward, or to our little group. And so by the time we left, we had 3 or 4 families, American families that had moved in. And there's a podcast, actually, all in one podcast with Morgan Choi. She's the one that talked about, she was one of the families that arrived there, and she did a podcast with, you can look that up. She talks about us a little bit about coming and that experience we had there with the church in Turkmenistan. No temple. Our temple was Switzerland, was our district. And we thought, well, we'll never get there, and we never did. But we missed the temples. We were there for 2 years, and then my next assignment was Frankfurt, Germany. And when we got transferred to Frankfurt, they were just finishing the renovation of the Frankfurt Temple, and were doing the open house. And so we moved in, and we attended the international branch there. And so their youth groups, we were able to go and help with the open house. And so that was really my first temple open house experience as a volunteer, was in Germany of all places. And it was just a wonderful experience. Am I doing okay on time? Here, she's going to pull on my suit coat here. While we were there, then COVID hit. So that was 2019, 2020. We were in Germany. The German government was very strict with their protocols. They locked everything down, much more so than here. But when they reopened the temple, the first thing that they allowed was baptisms, because they said, okay, you're in chlorine and it's hygienically safe and you can do baptisms. And so the temple president would bring in the youth groups, and since there weren't any adults in the building, he just gave his whole attention to the youth, which was fantastic. We talk about, if you go to Logan, if you go with your youth group here, you're there 45 minutes to an hour at the most. They're in and out because they're so busy. You couldn't get through a baptistry session within less than 2.5 hours with President. It was Wolfgang Pils was his name, and he would bring the youth in and talk to them. He would talk about every painting they'd passed, and then he would talk about the baptism and why you're there. And you have to ask my kids if they remember that, but even after baptisms, he would actually take them down to the lower fountain. He would pat the oxen and get to know them and talk about the oxen and why they were there and the symbolism. And it was just a unique time. But that man shared his love for the temple, and that just inspired me and further inspired me to have a great love for the temple. And then after we left Frankfurt, we were transferred to Montevideo, Uruguay, and so South America. So 3 continents later, we were in Uruguay, and this temple is actually in Carrasco. It's a suburb of Montevideo, and we happen to live just a mile away. Our meeting house was right next door, and it was such a wonderful opportunity to be there. I think that was probably the most loving, welcoming ward that I've ever attended, and they had an amazing youth group. And we took our youth, I think, almost every month to the temple there to do baptisms in Montevideo. And a very small temple, it was about 10,000 square feet, but it met their needs, and it was a beautiful, beautiful temple. While in Uruguay, my kids are growing older. My oldest was in high school now, and one day, shortly after the new year, my wife asked me, "What are we going to do next?" Or we were kind of struggling with. I didn't learn very much Russian, and I didn't learn very much German, and Spanish was okay, but we struggled where we were at, and we always felt like it wasn't the end game, that we were being prepared for something. And she asked me, "When are we going home?" We kept our house in Newton, and knew we would come back someday. We just didn't know when. And so she asked me that question just after the new year. And I said, well, the only other job I've ever thought of taking is a facility manager for the temples. It's the same job, and you don't have to move around the world. You just stay there. And I said, let me think about it, pray about it. And then I'm slow. It took me about 2 weeks, and the Spirit finally hit me over the head and said, they announced last year a temple in Smithfield. That's your backyard. You should apply. And I said, well, okay. So I didn't know anything about working for the church at the time. So I started looking at their job postings and their open house dedication dates and trying to do some homework. And they were hiring everybody right before open house. And I said, oh, well, we got time. We'll finish our tour in Uruguay, and then I'll apply. And if it's the right thing, the Lord will bring us home. Well, I need to back up just a little bit. So just before this, my parents, when they found out we were going to Uruguay, my dad had retired, and they'd always wanted to serve a Spanish-speaking mission. He did a mission in Bolivia as a young man, as a 19-year-old. And so he put in a request. There were 4 openings in the Montevideo missions, and he put in a request and listed all 4 of them. And then we happened to know both of the mission presidents were in our ward in Carrasco, and they said, oh, we can help with that. And so they were called to Montevideo. So I had the unique experience of driving to the airport with the mission president in Montevideo, picking up my parents and taking them to their apartment, and they started their mission there at the mission office. That was a fun experience for our family. Fast forward to Mother's Day, and I told my mom, guess what? I'm going to apply for the Smithfield Temple job. If you want me to ever move home, you need to pray me there. And a mother's faith is something else. And so fast forward a couple months, and I got the job. And so we said, well, good luck in Uruguay. We're going home. And so we left. We got home to Cache Valley, and then 6 months later, I started here at the job site, and then 6 months later, I had the unique experience of going to the Salt Lake Airport and picking up my parents from their mission, and so I got to see them on both ends. And just the looking back, it's hard to see the hand of the Lord in your life as you're going forward. Sometimes when I say the heat of the battle, but life gets crazy. We all know that. We all have a million things going on, kids, family, work, you name it, church callings. But when you stop and look back, I can see how the Lord kind of prepared us step by step to be at the Smithfield Temple for right now. And just what a privilege that is. I remember when I applied, I took my wife to lunch and we were talking about it. We were sitting in the mall in Montevideo having lunch, and sometimes as facility managers we use the phrase "not in my house" or "this is my house," and it kind of hit me. I said I could never say that working for the temples or working for the church, because it's the Lord's house. And that when I said that in the mall, I knew I was going to get the job. That was before I had been given the job offer. And wasn't more than a week or two later, I got the job offer to come home. And so I felt like the Lord has prepared us. I feel like I'm very blessed because I get to work at the temple. But it's my testimony that if you put your life in the hands of the Lord, He will prepare you to do great things. He has a work to do, and He can use all of us. And there's the tissue. I couldn't find the tissue. There we go. So now we'll get to the Smithfield Temple. A few common questions. When is the open house? We don't know. Any speculation? If you look there at the bottom, if you see social media, most of the rumors are not true. And if you hear something in the Logan Temple, it's definitely not true. No offense, Sister Johnson. I know a lot of people. With the Bear Clubs there in the visitor center trailer for 3 years, people would come in. First thing would say, "I was at the Logan Temple and I heard this." And my immediate response was, "Well, then it's not true." I said, a lot of truth and revelation can be found at the Logan Temple. Just nothing about the Smithfield Temple can be found there. We don't know. There's still a lot that has to happen for the open house. I'll just give a quick update. I was going to do it later, but I'll do it now. On the inside, we're still polishing all the marble floors. There's still furniture that needs to be refinished. So there's just lots of little details. The temple department came through and they asked us to increase the number of worker lockers, so the actual locker stalls. And so those are on order now. And so just a few of those little things that have to take place. And until we have a solid date of when work is going to be done, they won't do an open house announcement. And so I expect it should be soon. Hopefully later this summer we should get the announcement. We still don't know if the open house will be this fall or next year. We don't know. People point out and says, "Well, it says 2026 on the building." I said, "Well, that's easy to change. We change stones all the time, so that's not a hard thing to do." What is the motif? Yes, there is a motif. No, I can't tell you. The church reserves the right to disclose those details when they want to. So there are a few people that know, and if they tell you, that's on them. I was told not to share those details, and so I can say there are 2 flowers, the native to Cache Valley, that they have chosen as the theme and the motif for the temple. Once you hear what they are, you'll have to look them up. They're not super common, unless you're maybe a horticulturist or a botanist. You might know what they are right off the top of your head. But they're very pretty, and you'll see that in some of the slides here in a minute. How much does it cost? I'm not allowed to say that either. When will Logan be shut down? We don't know. Again, rumors. I'm in some of those meetings with the Smithfield Temple, and my boss is in the meetings with the Logan Temple, and he said, "I don't know." He said it changes every week, so they don't know yet. They prepare and do their homework, and they're ready to do it whenever the temple department, the First Presidency, decide it should be done. And that's kind of what the open house is. Once we give them a date, we'll tell the temple department, "You can access the temple anytime after this date." Then it's up to the First Presidency to set the open house schedule, and we don't know what that is. That's up to them. Okay, next slide. Just a couple of quick facts about the Smithfield Temple. It was announced in April of 2021. The groundbreaking was in June of 2022. Elder Cook was here. Elder Stevenson was here. I watched that from Uruguay, so my parents shared the link with me. It's 15 acres, curb to curb on the site. It's approximately 88,000 square feet, and they have different models or designations for temples, and this one happens to be a 452B. And what that means, there are 4 endowment rooms, 50 seats each, with 2 baptistries or 2 fonts. and it's kind of a pioneer-themed building. Anybody that was able to go down to the Linden open house or go to the Linden Temple now, it's open. It's the exact same floor plan, but it's flipped north to south, so it's slightly different. Theirs is the Linden Temple is a much more modern design than the Smithfield Temple. Ours is a little more antique design, and so they call it a pioneer theme. Just a few thoughts from the architects. So they took some of the inspiration. So this is the Smithfield Tabernacle that's behind Smithfield Implement here. And this is what it used to look like, I think, back in the 60s. I don't know if there's anybody here that still remembers that tower on the tabernacle. But it has kind of an 8-sided octagon up here, and they kind of took the inspiration from that tower and the Logan Temple domes, and that's what they came up for the Smithfield Temple. As a kid, I played basketball there at the tabernacle and always wondered why it said Holiness to the Lord. I didn't know it was an old tabernacle. I thought it was the gym. So they left that carving there on the front door. You can still see it. They took inspiration for the windows, so it's kind of the same window design as Logan Temple. So if you look at the Smithfield Temple designs, it has the curved arches and the mullions and muttons at the top of the windows. And then I was just going to briefly, what time is it? Okay. I'm taking way too long. My wife's smiling at me, so I'll speed this up here. Just took a couple of shots from the outside of the temple. Just briefly, I'll point out this big window on the south that faces the highway. That's the extra large seating room. So there are 4 seating rooms in the temple. Right below it, that square window, is the bride's room. And so it's a very beautiful room. Kind of from the southeast perspective. This plaza here on the east is the bride's exit. So similar to Logan, when you get married, you can come out that exit. We have the recommend desks on both the north and the south. And so it kind of keeps the crowds and the noise away from the entrance, kind of isolates that. Just an east shot. These big windows on the east, or we call that they're the grand stair windows. So there's a big staircase that goes from that main floor all the way to the 3rd floor on the east side. Here to the north, you can see the north portico. Start to do a little education, so I talked with the recorder and a few people. They do call that the baptistry entrance. Any adults or anybody can go through that north entrance, but start to spread the word that the youth should come through the north entrance as much as possible. If they go to the south entrance, they'll still let them in, but then they have to be escorted through the building to get to the baptistry, and so they'll encourage the youth to go to the north side. Just another shot from the north. I'm going to click through these fairly quickly. You can see a lot of good pictures on Facebook, so you can look at that, or Instagram. Here on the west, though, I will point out the 3 big windows. If you didn't already know, that's the celestial room. So it's 2 stories inside. It's close to 45 feet tall inside. It's a magnificent space. And people. Just one note about that. Somebody made the comment that I can't wait till it's dedicated so the Spirit will be there, and we had to correct them. We said, no, the Spirit's already there, and Sister Johnson can attest to that. I was able to walk through with her, and I think you cried in about every room, right? Yeah. And so the Spirit is there. It's been fun. I consider, as a facility manager, I love buildings. I love maintaining buildings, and I feel that they have their own spirit, and they're almost like a living thing, so to speak, because of all the mechanical and electrical systems. And as we built the temple, I was here where they poured the first footing, and I felt that building getting more holy and more sanctified as the process goes. Is it perfect? No, but is it the best we can do? Yes, and the Lord will accept that. Kind of a shot from the southwest, and then a shot from the highway there. Just a unique perspective of kind of the symmetry of the parking lot and the layout. Yeah, that's one of my employees, Colton Bear. Yes, those little round oval windows do open up. They're there so that we can maintain those lights underneath that, so we can reach out. So that's about 180 feet in the air, I believe. The very top of the spire is 200 feet. And the red lights there at the top, they do have to stay. It's an FAA requirement just because of the proximity to the airport. And a lot of people ask, well, why is the north tower shorter? Was that an airport requirement? No, that's just the architects like that. So that's the only reason I have, is they like that design. There's the south portico lit up kind of at night with the carving there, Holiness to the Lord. I love that reminder that it is the Lord's house. There's a shot of the bride's exit there on the east, so the flowers are looking really good. There's the south portico, which you can't really see very well from the street, but they had all the plants in there. Just 2 weeks ago, they planted all the annual flower beds and used that as a staging area. And then the beautiful doorway and entryway there. Just a shot of the art glass. So if you knew what the theme was, you could pick it out, but you don't know that yet. So you'll have to watch when you do find out. And there's just another shot of the round windows. All right, I'll turn this over to my wife for a few minutes.
I remember I was having a really hard day, I think a hard week or month. I had a timeline at the Smithfield Temple of, things we had to accomplish and get done, and it was just a really hard day, and I thought, oh, why am I still even doing this? And I walked from one ordinance room into the celestial room. There was no furniture there yet. The carpet is painted, but no furniture. And the Spirit is there. I can't even describe it. It wasn't, more than just what I felt inside. I felt it. I felt it on my skin. It almost made me stop and say, remember why you're here. So, it's not dedicated, but the Spirit is definitely there. Before I say too much, I first want to, from all the construction workers at the temple, thank you for the cookies. You don't know how much they appreciated it. They loved Cookie Day. So those that helped, thank you. We had notes sticking everywhere. I would see them in toolboxes. Our whole elevator was covered with notes. Let's see if I can get this pointer. This one right here, you got this. It was hung on the scaffolding. Someone taped it up there at the bottom of the grand staircase. So as you came down those grand staircase, you looked right above you, and it said, you got this. And it was there forever till the poor thing was destroyed and someone finally took it down. So thank you. We really, really appreciate it. So 2.5 years ago, I was lurking at the Logan Laundry, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And then Tyler said, hey, do you want to come work at the Smithfield Temple? They're looking for someone to come help sweep and clean. And I said yes, and I think for the first month I giggled as I walked around with my, steel-toed boots and safety glasses and a hard hat. Never thought I'd be a construction worker, especially at my age. So this was a fun experience. I even have, this is my son Josh. He worked with us for a couple months before he went on his mission for the summer. This is a picture of their putting on the spire, and in my hand, that's the top piece. They hung the spire, and then they went and screwed on that top point. So I did cleaning, I ran a crew, I helped do protections. I learned so much, I did whatever I was asked. I even learned how to drive the forklift. I lost weight. And now I'm doing touch-up work, which I'm learning how to do better. But that's been fun. It's been challenging, but it's been so great. But the best part, these 2.5 years of working at the temple, is to be able to share about the gospel, about the temple, about what each rooms are. What do you say that it has the most non-members?
We'd say we have a lot of non-recommend holding temple workers.
Non-recommend holding temple workers. And they would ask me questions all the time because I was the one that was just always there. I worked with the subcontractors, so they all knew me. So I would get, what's this room? What's this? Why this? And it was so fun. I had one young guy, well, where do they put the choir? And explaining what's the difference between a temple and a church house and how we worship. I got to see blessings given to non-members, being encouraged by other non-members that says this works, this helps. I got to be a part of someone that had not been to church for a really, really long time receive a blessing. When he was just had a lot going on in his life, I've been able to explain what blessings are, how they work, and offer them. And even though some of those people didn't accept, they have that little bit of information. One of my coworkers, his wife was having a lot of health issues, and so he was missing a lot of work. And my boss, who's not a member, said to me, "You need to have you and BJ talk to him about getting his wife a blessing." He doesn't fully understand the priesthood, but he knows there's power there. He's learned that over the 2 years that he's been working on the temple. So some of the most amazing things are happening. I have a list. This is a list of people that I've worked with that I'm inviting to the contractor open house. So before they open it up to everyone, they have a day where the contractors that worked on the temple, they can come through with their family and show them what they did, what they worked on, and to see the final result, because a lot of them will do their part and then they're gone and they don't see the end. So this is my list that I'm going to give each of them a personal invitation and say, no, come. One of them, he kept saying, "Why are you so happy? The world's it's going to pot. Everything's so bad. How can you be happy?" And to be able to explain the plan of salvation, as he questioned, well, what happens after this life? Am I going to hell because of the mistakes I've made? To testify of the second coming of Jesus Christ. We brought in a couple temp workers, and I went out to meet them, and I hear him talking to the security guard saying, "I know my car smells, but I promise I'm not high and there's no drugs in my possession." And I'm thinking, well, this is going to go well. And he got out of his car and met me, and he said, "Thank you for letting me come. I just moved back in with my parents, and my mother was praying that I could find work." And the phone rang to come work at the temple. And I told him, I said, everyone is here at this temple for a reason. And the question is, what are you going to do with it? And I watched him and several others have experiences that were amazing. One kid that was not a member come through, and we had some, discussions here and there. I would tell him what the different rooms are, and he says, "Oh yeah, I'm Christian. I've been to Bible study," but he, always listened very sincere and very intent. And one morning he said, "Hey, Melise, do you believe that dreams can be real?" And I said, "Oh yeah. Just think of Joseph in the Bible and the dreams he had." And then I also shared, a personal experience that I had with some dreams. And he said, "Because yesterday I was looking out from the temple, and I felt and I saw that I was here before." And I said, "Yeah, that's a real thing. Hold on to it." And there was other things that happened that week that he was there. So, such good things are happening at the temple. And these kids are finding their way a little bit closer to our Savior, Jesus Christ. And I'm so thankful for that. Just one other quick one. I had one electrician. There was 3 of them that were about ready to leave, and they were done and moving on to another project. And I said, okay, guys, you got to come to the open house. And they're like, okay, yeah. And the one said, he goes, my in-laws, they're really religious, and they would love this. And I just want to see what it's all about. And I said, okay, I will make sure I text you. He goes, do you promise me? I really want to be here. I said, yeah, I will promise you. So, my question for you guys tonight is, who are you going to bring to the temple? And not to just the temple open house, but who can you bring to the temple, not tomorrow, it's closed, this week? I don't know if you guys remember Kristen Yee's talk this last conference when she shared the story about her dad, where he was at a low point and his ministering brothers came and visited with him, and one of them said, do you want to go to the temple with my wife and I? And he accepted the invitation, and he went weekly with them. And the change that he made in his life, and she witnessed that change as he became a temple worker, and his relationship grew with his Savior, and his relationship grew with other people. So I invite you to ponder. I know we like to go with our spouses or whoever, but who can we take with us to the temple? Who needs that extra hand? Sometimes it's hard to go by ourselves. I am so thankful for the opportunity to go to the temple, to better understand the covenants that I have made. This is BJ, me and one of my coworkers. Holiness to the Lord. President Nilton said, the Lord loves to teach us in his own house. I just think that's so wonderful. Last week I was at, this last week I was at a regional training up in Idaho, and the stake president said, we don't need to walk where Jesus walked. We can walk with him in the temple. And I believe that's true. And I'm going to turn the time over back to Tyler.
Thank you, Melise. She was on that construction crew for a reason. Like she said, I've been asking her to help me with home projects for 20 years now and didn't get much luck, but she'll do anything for the Lord, I learned, including driving a forklift. You know, I grew up on a farm. We still have an old front-end loader tractor, and I've needed help before, and she wouldn't touch it. But she came home one day and said, will you teach me how to drive the tractor? And I'm like, why? Because they asked me to drive the forklift at work. I need practice. She has such a great testimony, and sometimes a little jealous because I was in meetings and working and kind of separated from the workers, and she was right in the thick of it every day. And to be able to be that missionary and that example and to share that spirit, it was impressive to watch. Gonna skip one or two slides here, but we wanted to talk tonight. We talked a little bit about my temple journey, how I got to be physically here at the temple. Wanted to share, just in closing, just my love of the temples. I think as a teenager, the movie The Mountain of the Lord came out, and that was my favorite church movie for years. When they talk about the building of the Salt Lake Temple, and when I talked about maybe working as a temple facility manager, my dad said, well, you always said you were going to work for the temples or do something with temples. And I said, yeah, I know. I just didn't know if it was when I, grew up and retired and I was going to be an ordnance worker. I just didn't know. But the Lord had plans for me to be here, and I just want to express my gratitude for the stewardship and the privilege that I've been given to work at the Smithfield Temple, and that the Spirit is there. And that's kind of, as we talk about my temple journey, I wanted to apply that also, my personal covenants. We all need to make our temple covenants. And so as a young man, as I became a deacon and then a teacher and a priest and then became an elder and then was able to go and receive my own endowment at the temple and to go do baptisms for the dead and to then later be sealed to my wife in the temple. Some of the most meaningful experiences of my life. And I'm preaching to the choir here. You're here because of your love for the temples and for the covenants you've made. And for those that haven't yet made those covenants, I encourage you to do so and to plan and prepare to make those covenants, and your life will be blessed. We have a picture here of the Logan Temple. Both me and my wife received our endowments there at the Logan Temple, and so it's a very special temple to us, just because of that. Wanted to talk a little bit about another temple journey that you can do of service. There are going to be lots of service opportunities, and so, the Wassums are here tonight. They're the open house committee chairman. There'll be lots and lots of volunteers needed. I can't remember the number, but it's multiple thousands of volunteers that they're going to need. And so those volunteer assignments will come down through, the priesthood channel. So they'll come down through the wards and the bishops, or through the stake and through the bishops to sign up to volunteer at the open house. And then after the open house, there'll be opportunities to be temple workers. And so if you've ever thought of being a temple worker, act on that thought. They take all ages now. And so that's a great opportunity to serve. Just wanted to expound a little bit. It sounds like Brother Stansfield, the recorder, he'll be here next month, and he'll talk a little bit about some of these opportunities to serve. I just wanted to let people know that there are ordinance workers that we all kind of envision in our mind, but there are also, you can be a temple worker and be called to the laundry, or you can be called to the grounds crew. So if you like to help on the grounds or on the facilities staff, if you're a retired HVAC or plumber, I'd love to have you come and help us out. And it's a way to serve. There may be some security opportunities. We have a very low security risk, so we don't have any full-time security employees. But just like the Logan Temple, if they decide to open on Sundays and let people access the grounds, they'll have missionaries called or temple workers called to kind of monitor the grounds on the Sundays. And so we'll see how that plays out with the temple presidency and how they decide to operate that. And then I also get a question all the time of, well, what can you do? So now I'm talking to you and imploring for your help. Pray for the work to be completed. We're so close. We just need a little push. And I know many of you have been praying for years now, and we feel those prayers. Please continue to pray for the workers. Like we said, there's a lot of non-members that work on the temple, and they have felt the spirit of that building. Pray for them. Pray for yourselves that you'll be ready for the open house, for the dedication, to go to the temple regularly. And pray for those to who you can bring with you to the temple. Just like to end by saying, I know it's the house of the Lord. It is his house. And can't wait till we have the dedication as all of you. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. We have about 3-5 minutes. I don't know, however long you want to go. But I told Sister Johnson I'd open up for questions. So happy to answer any questions. If anybody has some questions, happy to field questions for a few minutes if anybody has any. I answered the first one of we don't know when it's going to be dedicated or done yet. So, and the motif and the cost. But is there any other questions anybody would like to ask me? Kind of a unique setting where it's not a sacrament meeting. So in the back there, please. Let's wait for the mic so we can make sure everybody can hear. That's yeah. Me too.
How many workers are still left on the grounds working on a daily basis?
Well, for Jacob's Construction, there's 3 of you? My wife is one of the last ones standing. So there's 3 or 4 of the actual Jacobson employees, and then there's a number of subs. And so we had a temple department inspection about 6 weeks ago. I can't remember exactly when, about 6 weeks ago. And they came through and kind of did an audit, did special projects department, actually build the temple to meet the needs of the temple department. And so they did an audit, and they found a few deficiencies, and most of them we knew about, and there was just pending punch list type things. But then they also added about 20 nice to haves. So the temple department was like, we would like this, like adding 150 lockers to the locker rooms. So right now, any given day, we've got the Jacobson construction management team, and then there's anywhere between probably 5 and 10 or 15 subcontractors there on any given day. So depending on what time you're there, you can see a few trucks in the parking lot, but not a lot. It's really, really dwindling fast. Sometimes up to 30. Yeah, 10 to 30. Yeah, it changes every day. Good question. And you'll start to see that, I think, as the summer. So, I mean, there's going to be a big, strong push here through the month of July. And then there may be some straggling tasks, later into August, September. But we hope to be done here pretty quick. So, yeah, good question. Anything else? It's your one chance to ask me anything. Back row.
You feel that it unfolded in the timeline that you had envisioned?
Yes. I mean, it's not that far off of most of the other timelines for that size of temple. And so we're very, very lucky. They actually made some changes early on. You may have heard that originally it was supposed to be a granite temple, and they decided to change that as we were pouring the footings and foundation. And so that set it back a little bit. We've had challenges. Every project has its challenges. Elder Gong visited. I wasn't there, but Sister Bearclough visited. Elder Gong came and visited. And the superintendent at the time was Eric Vaughn, and he was talking with Elder Gong, and he was expressing some of his frustrations. That was that first winter where it snowed, 2 feet every other day, and we spent half the day shoveling snow instead of pouring concrete. And he stopped the superintendent and looked at him and said, "It's going just as the Lord has planned it," And so, we all have our own expectations and timelines, but the Lord knows what it's doing. And like I said, we just consecrate ourselves and do our best every day and try to overcome the challenges we all have. But yes, I 100% believe that it's just progressing right along the timeline that the Lord has set. And then, the Lord's prophet will announce the dedication open house here soon. So, yeah, good question. Right here in the front.
What are some of the countries that the church resourced some of the building materials? I know a lot of it's from other countries.
That's a good question. If you ask Michael Thompson's the director of temples in North America, and he says, "Quit specking out stone and materials from war-torn countries. It delays our projects." But the exterior stone, it's a limestone, and so they changed it from a granite temple to a limestone temple, and it comes from Germany. It's southern Germany. I heard the quarry was just outside of Munich, and so they cut the big blocks of stone and transported it to Portugal, and that's where they cut and shaped it. Some of the site stone has some granite. It's almost got a pink hue to it. We call it a water course. It's the very bottom course around the temple. That came from Portugal, and so the two exterior stones were from Germany and Portugal. And then the interior stone kind of comes from all over, but a lot of it's Italian marble. There were some stones, I'm trying to remember if it was Turkey and Iran maybe even, where they had sourced some stone. And then for those that have been in a lot of the newer temples, they do a lot of inlaid motifs and patterns in the stone, and so they use a water jet and cut, and we have that all throughout the temple. The fonts in the basement were from Italy. They were quarried in Italy and then shaped and cut in Italy. So when they poured the concrete supports for the fonts, they did a laser 3D scan, and there's 2 fonts, mind you. A lot of times, that's one of the hardest things in the temple to build is the fonts. And a lot of times they struggle because they have to get the piping just right and pour those perfectly, and they have to redo them quite often. And they tasked a man by the name of B.J. Hull. He used to own Badger Screen Printing. He was working for Jacobs Construction. He's a screen printer, mind you, but he has a love for temples and wanted to build the temple. And so he knocked on the superintendent's door early on when they had the hole in the ground and said, "I'll come work for free." And they said, "No, we'll hire you." So he did such a good job on the concrete crew that they said, "Well, you get to pour the fonts." And so he poured the 2 fonts, and after they laser scanned them, they were identical enough that they carved the marble the same for both fonts. He nailed it first try, which was amazing. So BJ did a great job on that. So if you know BJ, just give him a thumbs up and thank you for us. Lots of great stories, and he has a great story too. But I'm trying to think of any other materials that you know of, Elder Bearclough, that come from other countries. Mostly it was the stone. The woodwork, the millwork is all it's mostly European beech, so any of the stained woodwork is a European beech. A lot of that comes from the forests in Denmark and other parts of Europe, and it's got a dark stain on it. And then I think that's the most. Yeah, some of the glass, the chandeliers, and different pieces, they're sourced from places around the world. One of the things that's interesting to me, so I have an engineering background and worked at a cabinet shop for a lot of years, and usually they'll give you samples to start a project. So they say, here's your color choices of wood, and here's your carpet, and here's your art glass. They don't do that for temples. So they'll have the architects design the temple, create the rendering that we've all seen of the Smithfield Temple. There are some interior renderings that the church doesn't publish very often, but they do publish those. So they will take that rendering, and the First Presidency will approve it, and then they tell special projects, go figure out how to build this temple like this. That's the challenge. So then they have to go source materials from wherever they can in the world. And there's a lot of, I wouldn't say debate, but it's challenging. We look at Solomon's temple and the scriptural references of how they source the finest materials, to build the temples. And yes, we can do that today, but we're also cost conscious as well. If we could spend lots of money building a temple with all the finest materials, but do we really need to do that? Is it good enough? And if we save a little money on this temple, we can go build another temple, and we can build another temple. And so that's a game that, not necessarily a game, but that's a challenge that the Special Projects Department has, and they work very closely with the presiding bishopric that controls the funds and the building of the temples to make sure that we're doing it how the Lord wants it right now. But yeah, it's amazing to see where all the materials come and how they all come together, and just the quality level is amazing to me. Sister Johnson.
I'm so impressed by the skill set of the workers.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to cry. Do you mind sharing the story of how the carpet in the celestial room is the design?
Yeah,
Just one
how
little skill
they
set.
carve it. Is that one? There's a father son that they carve the carpets. So Logan's celestial room used to have a carpet carved in the middle. They don't always do that anymore, but they laid the white carpet in the celestial room, and then they have some stencils, and they lay it on the floor, measure it out, and they mark it with a Sharpie on that white carpet. And they draw the patterns all over the carpet. And then he sits on his hand, the father and son, they sit on their hands and knees, and it took them about a week, and they had a sheep shear, and they just sat on their hands and knees and carved the carpet. And you can't make a mistake, right? I mean, you can't glue the carpet back together. And so they did an amazing job with that carpet. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. And so they do that. Now, they don't always do it. When I talked to them, they said they'd done over 200 temples. And so they fly around the world and just carve the carpet in the temples. Some of the carpets are actually made at the factory now. So with the CNC capabilities and the machines and the computers, they can make the carpets look carved right from the factory. And we have white carpet that's carved in the celestial room, and all 4 ceiling rooms have white carpet that has been hand carved around the altars in the ceiling rooms. And the craftsmanship is amazing. Some of the tile guys, the interior tile guys, I'm a do-it-yourselfer, and I've done some tile, but those guys are just amazing. I mean, it's flawless. They do such a good job. The stone guys on the outside of the building, we had about half the crew were from Utah or locals, and then they brought in a crew from Colombia, and they worked for the stone guys, and they had done, I think it was the Honduras temple, and they kind of bounce around the world wherever the stone companies need them. And those guys were amazing as well. Just the craftsmanship, the attention to detail. It blows me away how well they can do that. And even some of the first timers, I know the Lord is there with like BJ doing the fonts and getting those perfect the first time. It's just amazing. Great question. Yeah, Brother Johnson.
I had heard that, a rumor, right?
Yep. It's not true.
I had heard that for the size of the project, there was an amazingly low number of accidents and injuries. Is that correct?
I don't know. As far as we did have at least 1 or 2 taken by ambulance. We had 1 accident, but he is fully recovered. He fell on a ladder. But as far as I'm aware of, very, very few accidents or injuries. I don't know how that compares to another commercial, job site or industrial job site. But yes, I feel like we've all been very, very watched over and protected. had the opportunity, just along those lines, we had a concrete worker that originally from Venezuela had immigrated and hurt his knee, and he was, a diehard Catholic, and hurt his knee, and he was one of those that we had talked about blessings, and he asked me and BJ to give him a blessing, and we were able to do that in my office one night, and that was a very special experience. I got to use a little of my Portuguese or my Spanish, so that was the first anointing I've ever done in Spanish, and it was just a sweet experience. And so I know that the Lord watches over the workers. One thing that we don't realize or talk about very often is the opposition to building temples. It's very real, and a lot of these workers that are not members of the church don't understand why they're working at the temple and having their home lives or their personal lives just completely fall apart. And then they dutifully come every day, and we're spending 10, 12, 14-hour days, working on the temple and going home and having a really hard home life. And, they didn't understand that. And we talked to some of them about, that's Satan. He doesn't want this work to progress. Stick with it, and the Lord will bless you. And we've seen that as we've gone through the project. As Melissa said, her current boss there is not a member of the church, and he encourages other people to get blessings now, and is having really good conversations about the gospel and about the church, and it touches lives and it changes lives, and that's been one of the most rewarding experiences, I think, of working at the temple, is seeing how the temple affects the lives. I mean, the temple is just a building, right? But the Lord uses that as a tool to change lives and to save us. And we all have the opportunity to go to the temple. And so, again, just invite everybody to go. Yeah. Great questions. Yeah. Oh, we got 3 all at once. This is good. You're warming up.
So to work in the temple seems like it would just be a wonderful blessing for anyone who's had a career or is currently working still. To me, that seems like it'd be the ultimate place to work. And so I was just wondering, throughout this experience, what has been one blessing that you're really grateful for?
That's a good one. I don't know if I can narrow it down to one. I always told Elder B, they were the volunteer missionaries, and I said, well, I get double blessings. I get paid to be here, and I get the spiritual blessings. I think for me, it's just, I've seen a change or felt a change in myself. Just, it's not dedicated yet, and I feel myself, just trying to watch myself even more each day. Like, I got to go to the temple tomorrow. Maybe I shouldn't watch that movie, or maybe I should listen to that song, or, I tried to keep the Spirit with me more and more, and just striving to be there in the temple. And I've talked, with other people that work at operating temples, whether they're temple ordinance workers or paid employees, but that desire to go and be prepared and be ready and be there every day. And I think that's just a unique experience and a blessing, and it can change us. And whether you're not an employee or not, I guess, we can go regularly. That's why they encourage us to go to the temple regularly, because it does change us. And I think that's probably the biggest blessing in my life that I've seen. And, if you ask my kids, I have a long way to go. If you ask my wife, I have a long way to go. But we try every day to be a little better. We're over here.
Just another thing that I'd kind of heard, people talking about, but has there been any water issues in the basement?
No. When they did the site study, so before they even broke ground, they bought the property and they drilled 38 test wells on the site. And Smithfield historically has a high water table in a lot of areas. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Elder B, but I think they said 38 feet plus or minus 5 feet or something to that effect. Or 42 feet down, plus or minus 5 feet, depending on the water year, you'll hit water. The lowest footing in the temple is 38 feet down, and that was the spring after we had that massive snowy winter. And so we had a really high water table that spring. And so when we dug down to pour that last footing, we did hit water. But it wasn't unexpected. It wasn't something we hadn't planned for. In order to deal with that, they have to pump the water out. So we pumped, I think it was 5 million gallons a day that we were pumping out of that footing. And so what they did is they pumped the water out, formed it, poured the concrete, waterproof it, and then we shut the pumps off and just let the water come back up, and it's stable. And that's 38 feet down, and then the lowest part of the elevator is another 10 or 12 feet above that. And so I don't expect it will ever have any water issues in the temple. We did put a little sump hole in the bottom of that elevator pad just in case. We also have a French drain around the north half of the temple with an automatic sump and a float. And so very, very well thought out, very well planned. We had heard that there's a river running through the temple, and it was leaning at one point. Lots of rumors, but just natural consequences of, they choose a site by inspiration, and grateful to the Polson family for caretaking of that site for the last 100+ years. But Dixon Hyde was a project manager that was hired as a contractor consultant when I first got there, and he was, how old was Dixon? He was 68, and he a career contractor. And I'd walk the site with him, and he would just walk around every day and be like, "This is a perfect building site. You couldn't ask for a better building site." Just looking at the gravel and the clays and how it all was mixed together, and he was right. It's a very, very good building site. And so, I don't know where you live in Smithfield, but right there by the temple, the water's down there quite a ways. So it's good. Is there a question? Yeah, in the back.
Compared to other temples that are being built now or even in the past, how is the size of ours compared to most of the temples nowadays?
That's a good question. So, as I mentioned earlier in my talk, they call it a 452B. So 4 instruction rooms, 50 seats each, and 2 baptisms. The largest temples they build right now, or they call it a 480. So Layton is a 480, so it's got 4 instruction rooms with 80 seats. By comparison, Logan's like a 490. I think there's 90 seats or close to that in Logan. But the current biggest plan they have is a 480, and I shouldn't say rarely, but those are mostly Utah, Idaho temples that are very busy, are the 480s. But our 452B is the same size as a 480, but we have the 2 fonts. So square footage wise, it's comparable to like the 480 plan. If you take the original Logan Temple footprint, the original rock part of the Logan Temple, it's actually much smaller than the Logan Temple, smaller than the Smithfield Temple. The Smithfield footprint's quite a bit bigger than that. But after they added the annex to the Logan Temple, I want to say it's around 122,000 square feet, and Smithfield is 88,000 square feet. And so, by comparison, Salt Lake is going to be close to 500,000 square feet now that they've done the renovation. It's the largest temple by far. The new Provo Rock Canyon Temple is twice the size of Smithfield, so it's 160,000 square feet. It's massive, but it does support BYU, and it supports the MTC, and they're very busy. And I want to say it's got 5 instruction rooms if I remember correct, and I can't remember the size, or 690, or so maybe 6 instruction rooms. Salt Lake's a 120, I think, so you can hold 120 in the 5 instruction rooms in Salt Lake once they're done. But most of those temples are here in Utah, Idaho, that are that size. Quite a few of them they call them a 240, so there's 2 instruction rooms, 40 seats each, or a 140, or a 230, a 130. So sometimes they have one instruction room, 30 seats. Sometimes they have, I can't remember exactly, they call it a flex room, so it's more like a multi-purpose room, so they can set it up for ceilings one day, and they can set it up for an instruction room the next day. And so it just depends on the needs and the number of members in those areas. And so they plan temples kind of on 2 criteria. I just learned this last month. Temple department planners came through, and one criteria they use is getting a temple close to the saints, so the proximity of the saints. So if there are enough members of the church in an area to support a temple, they try to get a temple in that area. And then the second criteria is, okay, if there's already a temple, if it's too busy, like we have at Logan, then we need to start looking at building another temple. And so those are the kind of 2 criteria they look at. And, with the 2 fonts, I feel like we're very blessed. There aren't very many temples with 2 fonts. Syracuse has 2, Linden has 2. I believe they're the only ones that are operating right now that have 2 fonts. Salt Lake will have 2 when they're complete. Somebody mentioned to me once, though, that it's a direct reflection of the faithfulness of our youth in the area of needing those fonts. And if any of you have taken youth groups, I've been taking youth groups to the Logan Temple for 20 plus years now, and it's hard to schedule those appointments. They're busy. And any of you that work there at the Logan Temple know that. It's a busy place. And so we have a lot of faithful members, a lot of faithful parents that are teaching their youth, and the youth, we hear a lot of bad today, but it's a place that they have the testimony of the work, and I feel very blessed that the Smithfield Temple will have the 2 fonts to support that. It's quite amazing for those that have seen it. The floor plan is great. There's a common check-in desk in the baptistry, and then we have confirmation rooms on each side. There's east and west, and there's east and west fonts and chapels, and then there's men's and women's locker rooms both on the east and west. So there's 4 locker rooms in the basement, so it can really handle that flow of youth in the baptistry. So, great. Thank you. Anything else? Anything you want to add, Melise? No. One more question in the back. Yep, Ephraim is very similar. It is just a smaller version of this temple. It's one of the first. So Linden was the first one they kind of built of this version. Ephraim's right there, just smaller. So I think it's a 240 if I'm not mistaken. I think Montpelier is the same. So they're about half the size. They're about a 40,000 square foot temple. Heber's going to be closer to the same as Smithfield. And then also the new West Jordan Temple is the same kind of floor plan footprint as Smithfield. Yeah. So that's a good question. So if you know a lot about rebar and concrete, so we use some number 11 bar, which is an inch and, inch and a quarter or something like inch and 3/8. I think one stick of that weighs like 120 pounds, I figured out, on that rebar. And they built the curtain walls out of the rebar, and it was so tight they couldn't get regular concrete to flow in it. So they used a self-consolidating concrete, which almost was like water. So if you do a normal concrete, you do a slump test, and it's got to be 7-8 inches tall. On the self-consolidating concrete, they kind of do a splatter test. I can't remember what they call it, but it has to run and just spread out more than 24 inches, or it's not thin enough. So they had to form it up, and they had to tape and seal and foam all the forms, otherwise the concrete would just run out. And so it's got kind of like an epoxy type mix. I'm not a concrete expert anymore. I did a little bit of schooling for that, but they did use this. They used both types, but in a lot of that big rebar in those places in the temple, they use the self-consolidating concrete, and some of those walls are 24 inches thick, full of that number 11 bar, and then if you're walking through the temple, you'll be able to recognize it. So there's some of the cased openings that are like 3 feet of just wood openings, and that's because you're walking through what we call the concrete shear walls. So as you're walking through the temple there in some of the locker rooms and some of the rooms downstairs, you'll be able to identify those openings, and you're walking through the concrete walls. And the question in the back.
I'd just like to know if you can hear the planes and the trains when they go by.
I have not been able to hear those. Not inside. It's insulated very well. That's one of the things I learned. So the celestial room itself has 2 walls. So they have like a 10-inch and a 12-inch wall, if I remember right. So they built a wall out of steel framing. They double layer of drywall. So they put 2 5/8 sheets of drywall, which is thicker than you do at your house. And then they insulated it, and then they left an air gap, and then they built another wall and insulated that wall. And so they do a lot of work to make it. That's why they're so quiet. And you talk about the HVAC system, they call them sound traps, but they're kind of J-shaped duct pieces that keep the sound from transferring through the temple. So there's a lot of thought put into how do we make this temple quiet and peaceful to not have any distractions. But great question. Is it earthquake proof? Nothing is earthquake proof, but it doesn't have the base isolators because it's a different building. So we have the rebar that's all tied together top to bottom, and it's all steel structure. And so if I don't remember, but I want to say it was a 7.5 to 8.0 earthquake. Is it an 8.5? I can't remember what they designed it to. He said 9. I don't remember. Over 9 on the earthquake engineering. And so basically what happens is the whole building is it's so solid, it's just one big block, and if the earth moves, it'll just shake, and then when the earth stops, it'll be standing. So nothing's earthquake proof, but they do a lot of engineering to try to make it as safe as possible. So newer technology than when they built Salt Lake, so they didn't have to do the same type of retrofit. But there's another question back there, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned in passing flex space in some temples. Could you address that a little bit more?
That's about all I know.
That's all you
Yep.
know?
So
Okay.
unfortunately, this is my first temple experience, so I don't know a lot about that. But I do know that they have some of the rooms where it's like a flex space, and I don't know exactly what they use it for, but they could set it up, I believe, for a ceiling. They might take the seating room out take the altar out and set it up as a worker instruction room for their meetings, and so they can move that back and forth. But it's the really small temples that they do that in. But that's as much as I know. Over here. Yeah, please.
We just went to Casper Temple, and they have a flex space
Yeah.
temple there. So when we went into the endowment, it's not called endowment room, which is the instruction room. There was probably like 30 chairs. They were like a dining room chair. They weren't your choir chair that goes up and down, and they were not secured to the floor, but they were padded and very comfortable. It's a TV for the screen, and they have doors that cover the TV. The altar is not secured to the floor. They use an iPad on the side on a table that makes the TV change, and so your officiator does not get up and down because he doesn't need to touch the altar at all. And then when they want it to be a sailing room, they move the altar into the middle, and they rearrange all your chairs, and then you have a sailing room.
They had two rooms, two instruction rooms like that. And what they told us is that they set one up as an endowment room and one as a ceiling room. And then when the endowment's over, they swap.
Yeah.
And they move back and forth between the two rooms.
So that's great. That's being creative in the amount of space and the number of patrons they have each day, and they can do that in those temples. And so I know that was one of President Hinckley's biggest concerns, was we got to get more temples to the people, and they're accomplishing that. It's amazing to see and watch and see the ideas that come out of that and the inspiration that comes. As you were talking, and some of the things that they've changed in the temple. If you've been to a few of the temples now that are operating, they have what they call single booth initiatory for those that know what the initiatory ordinance is about. And rather than like at Logan where you kind of move around during that ordinance, here we have a dedicated ordinance room. It's just one room. You go in and you do the whole ordinance in one room without moving, and it's a lot more efficient and a lot quieter in my opinion, because it's just you got 3 solid walls and a heavy curtain. And so you'll notice that in some of the temples moving forward where they've changed that initiatory process. When they renovated Manti, they changed the Mantis, and I don't know what they'll do at Logan, but yeah. Great. I think we've been here an hour and a half, so if there aren't any last minute questions, I'll just again express my thanks for being able to come and share and talk about the temple. It's one of the best things that I've experienced in my life, and it's a privilege every day to just show up and be at the house of the Lord and take that responsibility seriously and hope to act as such. And I'm grateful for my wife and for her taking a few minutes tonight. I think I talked more than, well, she knew I was going to talk a lot. She always tells me I talk too much. She said I never said a word until I got called a bishopric, and now I never shut up is what she told me. So, but I do appreciate her and her support, her willingness to serve with me, to follow me around the world, not knowing why, and the faith that takes, and her love and the love that we've been able to share and grow together as a couple has been a great experience, and wouldn't trade it for anything. There are challenges, but it's been wonderful. And so, again, thank you, and I'll turn the time back over to Sister Johnson. Or is there just a closing prayer? Oh, song and a prayer.
Our dear, kind, and gracious Heavenly Father, we're grateful that we could be here today. We could learn more about the temples, and we're grateful for the amazing talks that have been prepared. We're grateful for this opportunity that we have to have one so close to us, and we pray that we can use it and continue to improve and grow each day, and that we can drive home safely. We love thee in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.